Alrighty, buddy. Hello and welcome back to the reserve team as we continue our season preview series. As always, I am Shaun, and we're continuing to work our way through all the A-League squads in the build-up to the A-League season starting. And at time of recording, and the time this video comes out, we are just around the corner from Christmas, but also just around the corner from the season starting, which I cannot wait for. We are going to talk Newcastle Jets today. They have had perhaps the toughest ride of any of the off-season clubs throughout the course of 2020. There's a whole bunch of stuff for us to get through, and thankfully, I don't have to go through it by myself. We've brought in two experts from around soccer Twitter and the football world to talk through all things Hunter Valley. First, joining from Sydney at the moment, hopefully being able to escape lockdown relatively quickly if we can, and of course surrounded by a phenomenal menagerie of kits that you can see in the background there, Lucas Eade. Lucas, thanks so much for jumping in with us today, mate.
No worries. Keen to get into it.
And also joining us as well, again, making their debut on the channel, but a long-time member of the Soccer Twitter and a huge supporter of us, just liking my tweets whenever I put anything out. It is Austin from the A-League Insider. Austin, thanks so much for jumping in with us, mate.
Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime. The biggest part, right? And like we've had, 2020 has been a weird year. The 2019-2020 season was incredibly weird because we had lockdown periods, we had hubs, we had all sorts of different stuff. And even this off season has felt incredibly strange because it's been a bit stop-start for all the clubs and all the different teams. I'm thrilled that we're getting to talk about football today, and I'm thrilled that the season's around the corner. We also got to now prepare ourselves for perhaps like an 8-month, 9-month off season once this season does end to get back to the winter season. So there's a whole bunch of stuff for us to cover off and a whole bunch of stuff for us to go through. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to quickly run through a bit of history on the Newcastle Jets themselves. And while I'm doing that, I want both of you guys to think about some of your earliest or fondest memories of the Newcastle Jets throughout the A-League period or from the most recent seasons or whatever else. So starting off, Newcastle United was formed in the year 2000 by businessman Con Constantine from the remnants of the old Newcastle Breakers NSL side, who had folded at the end of the 99-2000 season. The Newcastle United club were reasonably successful, completing in 2 of the last 3 final series and finishing second in the league behind Perth Glory in the 01-02 season. Following the end of the NSL era, when Soccer Australia rebranded to Football Federation Australia, when the A-League was announced, when there was basically an 18-month period with no top-tier football, the club made the decision to rebrand themselves as Newcastle United Jets FC to avoid confusion with the UK club of the same name, and in reference to the local RAAF base Williamtown, not far from the Newcastle base, and their training facilities. Early A-League success followed, with Gary Van Egmond winning the points and scoring the most goals in the final 10 games of the inaugural A-League season, storming into the final series with a very strong squad made up of players both from the previous NSL era and talent local to the region. They did eventually succumb to Premiers Adelaide United in the preliminary final at that stage, but all in all, a very successful year in the opening season. In the 2007-2008 season, the Jets hit their highest point, replacing departed stars Paul Ocon and Nick Carl, who'd recently moved to Turkey after a fantastic first few seasons in the league, with Adam and Joel Griffiths, local talent who was looking to get their footing in the A-League for the first time. Joel, I think the younger of those two brothers, went on to secure a then record score, 12 goals across the season, winning the Golden Boot and the Johnny Warner medal for that particular season. In the final series, Jets made it all the way through to the grand final, where they faced bitter local rivals and F3 Derby counterparts Central Coast Mariners, and in a spiteful grand final, following a Mark Bridge strike early in the second half, they secured their first and to date only A-League championship. The less said about the late penalty appeal in that match, gents, the better. We'll leave that one out. You guys can focus on the win, not necessarily any controversy with it. Up and down seasons did follow, though, with multiple seasons of player and coaching departures before the appointment of Ernie Merrick ahead of the 2017-2018 season. A slow start that season saw the club go on a run of 5 straight victories, including 5-1 and 8-2 victories against the aforementioned Central Coast Mariners in the F3 Derby, and storming into the end of season in finishing second position within the league itself. That final series saw the Jets defeat my club, Melbourne City, 2-1 in the semi-finals, courtesy of a Riley McGree scorpion kick that was unfairly robbed of a push cash award that particular year, but eventually succumbed to Melbourne victory 1-0 in the grand final at McDonald's Jones Stadium. Thanks to a monumental performance, not just from Victory goalkeeper Lawrence Thomas, but a massive VAR failure that should have ruled out Victory's winning goal due to an offside to Costa Barbarouses in the build-up. I can see both of you cringing as we go through that. We'll talk about that a little bit further in a moment. In the trophy cabinet, they've got premiership runners-up 2007 and 2008, and then again in 2017 and 2018, as we mentioned. Champions one time in 2008 and runners-up in 2018. Gents, a whole bunch of football, a whole bunch of years in terms of league history that we've just jammed into a couple of paragraphs there. But I'm desperate to hear about your earliest and fondest memories with the Newcastle Jets, maybe what brought you to them as a supporter, maybe what football's like for you in and around the Hunter region. Lucas, I'll let you have the first crack at this one, mate. What's your earliest or fondest memory of the Jets?
I went to a few Breakers games when I was a kid, and I knew about Newcastle United, but when the Jets started, it was a big buzz around town if you played or knew football, and I remember going to the games. I remember the gold kit. It's like still popular today with all the supporters. I think it was the second season, the Nicky Carl goal of the year. He just ran for everybody and toe poked it in. I think it did get goal of the year. That's a good memory. Just the players we had back then too. You mentioned the Griffiths brothers, Paul Ocon, Ned Zelich was in the first year. Those early days, the gold strip and that Nicky Carl goal for me.
Yeah, I mean, hindsight, like we always look back nostalgically to the early seasons of the A-League, even though myself as a Heart member, we were garbage forever, but I still, for some reason, look back on it fondly. I remember Ned Zelich signing was a big deal at the time because like he'd severed ties with the Australian international team, got left out of a national team squad and said he didn't want to be involved in Australian football, but then came back and started running amok, and now he's on Twitter boasting about conspiracy theories and whatever else. But yeah, again, the champagne kit, I can see a couple of them on the wall behind you there. Just those, we'll talk about that a little bit further later on in the podcast. Make sure to remind me because I think we want to talk a little bit about like the Newcastle identity and what parts resonate with Newcastle as a region and the Knights and the red and the blue, and then also what parts are perhaps the happiest memories for the fan base, which is largely gold. But we'll come back to that in the kit corner a little bit as well. Austin, same question for yourself, mate. What are some of your earliest or fondest memories with the Jets?
I remember going to a few games in the 14-15 season, and on that I enjoyed it so much that me and my dad became members of the club, and we've been members since. It was very good.
That's awesome. I mean, like we keep hearing kind of the same stories from fans across the league where really all they needed is just to go that first game. And because of the match day experience, because of the atmosphere that's unique to football in Australia and unique to the A-League itself, everybody comes back and says, I had a really positive experience. I don't think we've spoken to anyone yet. And by all means, people can hit me up on Twitter or trash me in the comment section below that said they gave the A-League an opportunity and didn't enjoy the experience. So it's interesting that you've had the similar one in a different part of Australia, but still, stick with it this day. And we want to try and get as many members as possible. We'll talk about that later in this series as well. The last 5 finishes for the Newcastle Jets, including last season, in 2015-16, they finished in 8th place. In 16-17, a 10th place finished, turning it around phenomenally under Ernie Merrick, as we already mentioned, in 17-18, finishing in 2nd and runners-up in the grand final. In 2018-2019, a 7th place finish, and last year, the 19-20 season, an 8th place finish. But I'm going to put the little asterisk next to it because it's the thing we keep hearing about on Twitter. After the lockdown period, that post-COVID period, they won more points than any other side in the division. It felt like Carl Robinson had turned a corner a little bit, did quite well in that run home to the season. Just unfortunately, the points gap was too large from how the way they had started the season. I'm going to ask both of you guys to go through your season highlight. I know it can be tricky when you don't make finals or when it can be a bit of a struggle, but if there's any silver linings from last season, what stuff excited you the most and what stuff are you hoping you might see again in the upcoming season? Austin, I'll let you have the first crack at this one, mate. Season highlights from last year.
The Perth Glory game in round 21 was probably the best game we had with the Topper Stanley Screamer. That was a great win. We hadn't won against them in like 3,000 days, I think, which was just amazing, with that great goal, winning goal of the year.
Yeah, I mean, some people say that ball is still rising into the back of the net as we speak today. It hasn't quite returned to the earth atmosphere. I don't think I've ever struck a ball that sweetly, but I can only imagine the joy that would have been going through the big centre-back's face. And who knows, mate, maybe they're going to turn him into a number 10 this year if that's his finishing ability each and every time out. Same question for yourself, Lucas. Any silver linings from last season or season highlights from the year?
Well, I really believe that with Ernie, he was pretty... stuck to the one style of football, and obviously that wasn't working, and that cost him in the end, I guess. If we won the grand final, maybe that would have flipped over, I don't know, but it seems when Carl came in, he kind of found the right shape and right thing for the players we had, and that's why I think we went on such a good run, and that's why it's so disappointing to say what happened or whatever. But the highlights, the Topper goal, I've got down on my notes. Apparently he does those at training all the time, so... and then the other one, a Igorkovic strike. I think we lost against Sydney 2-1. I remember him shaping to shoot with his left, and I was right behind the goal, and everyone yelled, "Shoot!" And instead, he dummied the player and just blasted it in. It was a great strike. Not as good as Topor's, but pretty good.
Mate, that top or Stanley goal, that's like upper echelon all-time A-League goals. There's nothing worse than like thinking you've scored an absolute cracker and then the week after someone goes and does something like that, which is crazy. A worthy winner of goal of the season last year, absolutely. I think the interesting point that you've noted there, Lucas, is the reference to Ernie Merrick. Like it's been a long-running theme, I think, in his coaching career that plan A is very good, but there isn't really like a plan B or even a plan A.5 or whatever you want to call it. It was the same issue at Melbourne Victory. It was the same issue at Wellington Phoenix when he had his time there. And I think once some of those pieces that he had in that 17-18 season departed, like Riley McGree, like Andrew Naboo, it became very challenging to try and replicate that same style and that same quality of play, which is difficult, but it is difficult, I think, for all the A-League clubs. Success tends to breed more interest in your players, more interest in transfers. Very interesting point, though. It would have been, like, who knows, is Ernie Merrick sitting on his couch right now, ruining VAR's failure, if he would still be in a job today if that result was reversed. But I think Carl Robinson definitely took steps in the right direction, and it did look like Newcastle was starting to play the style of football which has been synonymous with their most successful seasons. Speaking of the stadium itself, McDonald Jones Stadium, it's one of the few venues I actually haven't had the pleasure of going to yet in the A-League career. There's only 2 or 3 of them. You guys obviously more than fortunate as members and locals to be there each and every week. What are some of your thoughts on the stadium? How well do you think it serves Newcastle for their capacity? What's the match day experience like? What are the things that people might be looking at it as an away trip that they should take into account if they're going to head there and check out a game? Lucas, I'll let you have the first crack at this one, mate. McDonald Jones, what are your thoughts?
Sure. Look, when it's rocking, like when it's full capacity, or close to full capacity, it's an amazing experience. The early days of the Sea of Gold, even the 17-18 season, that grand final day at home is something I'll probably never experience again. Hopefully I do, because it was amazing. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Like it felt like a European night, but in Newcastle, Australia. It was awesome. I remember they had it was like a workers' club around the corner that everyone went to, and Laurie was there and Joel was there. It just felt awesome. It felt like something we'd reached, even though we'd won it in 08. We'd reached something that we haven't reached before.
Yeah, and I think that's the fascinating part about not the one club cities or the one region teams. It really is reflective of the entire community. We've spoken about it a little bit earlier in the week with Adelaide United and how it kind of rallies not just the entire city of Adelaide, but the entire state of South Australia behind that club because they identify so well. We've praised previously on the channel in podcasts and things like that the way Western Sydney Wanderers set up, where they did that real community engagement. And I think even the struggles that Newcastle are having now, which we'll talk about in further detail in a moment, guys like Laurie McKenna, guys like Joel Griffiths, they're definitely in tune with what the Newcastle Jets means for the Hunter region and what it means for Newcastle as a city, and how it tends to bring that entire football community there together in northern New South Wales. But same question as well for yourself, Austin. What are some of your thoughts on McDonald Jones? Do you enjoy it as a stadium? What's the match day experience like?
I think it's a great stadium. I do think it's a bit too big for an A-League team. Maybe 20,000 should be a maximum capacity, but when it is full, or at least 15,000, it's game day experiences are amazing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Sorry, go for it, mate.
All the fans just chant with the Squadron or Terrace Novocastrian, as they're called now. But yeah, it's just great.
Yeah, and Eddie Stadium, this is a weird thing to say. We've talked about stadiums, we've done tier lists, we've done a whole bunch of stuff. I've documented for a long time my hatred of the use of oval-shaped stadiums, and even some of the rectangular stadiums we've got, they still aren't the best match day and viewing experience because you're still a while back from it. It's still designed to be a big rugby ground, or it's still designed to have massive ends where the fans are a fair way back. Suncorp Stadium's a good example of that. Even Perth Glory's HBF Stadium is a little bit oval shaped. It used to be an oval back in the day. But McDonald Jones, and I put kind of Central Coast Stadium in this talk, Hindmarsh Stadium, they're proper rectangular ovals where you are relatively close to the action. Once they can get that atmosphere captured, and unfortunately the downside is usually sellout crowds are when the teams are winning or a good chance of winning. But usually when they can capture that sea of red and blue that we quite often see, I think back to the TIFOs and stuff during grand final seasons, during seasons when they were challenging for the title, and it does look like a phenomenal atmosphere in that ground. So fantastic that you guys are both enjoying it as well. And hopefully this season, lockdown restrictions permitting, cash flow permitting, I can make my way up there and take both of you for a beer or something like that before you no doubt beat Melbourne City 4-0, because they always lose when I do away days. Kit corner, we have briefly spoken about this off screen. Of course, Lucas, you've got a variety of kits behind you there from throughout the course of history. Over your shoulder, Austin, you've got that very sharp looking Roy O'Donovan away kit there. They're offering this season, we spoke about it off screen, but Viva was the original sponsor, and it looks like they've rebranded to Appel. They've got a relatively okay looking red and blue number as the home kit. They've got a white away kit with a little bit of green added to it as well, and then kind of the champagne/gold kit with some pinstripes on there as the third kit for this season. What are some of your thoughts on the kit offerings? Obviously, it lead up to Christmas. Cash is always a little bit tight, but we always seem to find a way to get ourselves a kit ahead of the upcoming A-League season. Austin, what are your thoughts on the kits this season, and are there any that you're looking to pick up?
I think they're pretty nice. You know, when they first bring out the concept, they didn't look that good. But when you see them in, like, the photo shoot, as they did last week, you know, they look really good. And my favourite is the gold and navy, because that's just lovely, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've already kind of spoken about it, but it seems like a lot of the fan base in football, or in and around the Jets specifically, is more, I think, closely aligned with the gold kit, and they haven't worn it as a primary kit for quite a long time. Whereas, obviously, and maybe Lucas, you could touch on this a little bit further, the red and blue, the Newcastle Knights colours, they are the town colours of Newcastle. Do you think there's perhaps room for them to move back to that gold kit as the primary and then just have, you know, like a red or blue kit away? I think last season or a couple of seasons ago, they had almost like a Barcelona rip-off kit that looked like someone had gotten from one of those kind of like dodgy markets somewhere around the suburbs. But first, Lucas, what were your thoughts on the Appel offering for this season, and what would you like to see out of future kits for the Jets?
Yeah, I like the three of them. I think the home one is the first one with it's got no red, so it's just navy blue with the gold pinstripes. Really? There's no red on it, which has been a first ever, I think, or for a while. But the white one is obviously a nod back to KB United and stuff, and the white, and that looks nice. And then you've got the gold, which is always popular. If you got a gold kit in that range, then I think you get a tick kind of thing. I've said this to Laurie before, and I think with the red and blue, because he came in, the club was red and blue. I think he's got an attachment to that. Because he came in and it's red and blue, so that's the way it's got to be. But I do miss, you can see with some that I've got the gold lettering, the font and stuff. I thought that had a nice touch to it because it kept the gold there, so it kind of united both eras. Where now we've got the white font. But yeah, as long as there's some gold somewhere. If that's primary, secondary, I'm happy. And, if it's in the badge, if it's in the lettering, if it's the away kit, it's got to be there because that's what the fans, especially the OG ones, that's what they identify with.
Yeah, I think, and I kind of touched on it earlier in the intro, talking about like club identity and like when you think about a particular club, what sort of stuff do you think about? And the red and blue stripes, it's iconic for Newcastle Knights in the NRL, so you understand why that kind of resonates with that community. But then when you think about it from a football context, like Crystal Palace, Barcelona, whoever else, it's been done elsewhere in kits, and some would say it's been done better. The fascinating part is that gold kit, I can't think of any other clubs or teams around the world that have a primary gold kit. So it is something unique to Newcastle, and it is a little bit of, kind of like that custom signature. That could be their unique thing, that they are the golden side. I do wonder, and we'll probably harp on this point a couple of different times, would everybody be happier with like a red and blue kit had they won that grand final a couple of seasons ago in that kit, and there's a bit more happier memory with it? You think back to them lifting the trophy wearing, I think they wore the away kit in that match, the white top with the gold shorts, which again, very, very sharp, and referencing their bygone eras as well. Like that resonates, I think, with a lot of players as being their peak and their happiest time. So just immediately seeing that gold kit come back out, and I like the little sharp pinstripe detail. I wasn't aware that you'd mentioned, Lucas, there's no red on the home kit. That's an interesting transition. We'll see how that plays out. But I think that's why it resonates with so many people. It'll be interesting to see how Newcastle moves forward. Hopefully, fingers crossed, and we'll get to this in a moment, with new ownership, if they do start trying to strike out and create more of a Newcastle identity, unique, not just in the region, but in Australian and world football, totally. We are going to jump forward now, and we're going to have a look at probably the parts that we spend the most time on. It's the players in and out and the makeup of the playing group for the upcoming season. We are going to start first with with players out, now we will go through these and then I've got a little disclaimer that I've got to read as well, so bear with me a minute as I run through these. But Bernie Abini has most recently left, heading to Western Sydney Wanderers after his contract was mulched. Dimi Petratos has moved to Al Vader, where he plays alongside Craig Goodwin in the Saudi Arabian Pro League. Glenn Moss has retired after a long and distinguished career in the A-League for a variety of clubs. Abdil Arroyo is back, I think, playing in Panama with a club named Arabe Unido. He started his season a few weeks back. Nick Fitzgerald has joined the exodus of players heading to the Indian Super League by joining Jamshedpur. James Donachie has signed for the club and then at the same time headed out on loan to FC Goa, also in the Indian Super League. Matt Miller, probably I think the first player to ever do this transfer route, heading over on loan to England, has joined Shrewsbury Town but is due to return on the 1st of January 2021 if current reporting is to be believed. And Joey Champness is out on loan at Brisbane Roar for the upcoming season, making his return from, I don't know, are we calling his rap career a failure at this point, or are we saying it's a work in progress? I don't know which one Joey C falls into at the moment. The one that I will call out, and we've mentioned this a couple of times, we mentioned it on the podcast last week, we mentioned it I think in our upcoming Western Sydney Wanderers preview as well. Bernie Abini, obviously the nature of his transfer is probably going to grate against you guys quite a lot. There are certain things speculated about on Twitter and in the media about mental health and the role that that plays with all of our footballers. None of us at the reserve team are mental health professionals, and while I'm sure we're all going to vent about frustrations of football agents and his departure and that sort of stuff, we are in no way engaging in that topic of mental health and the roles it plays in everyone's life. If it is relating to that and he's going to be in an environment now where he can look after himself and be better, we of course support that. And if anyone that's listening via YouTube or on Spotify who does have their own mental health struggles, please be aware that we may mention stuff that might, potentially resonate with you a little bit as well, but we are fully supportive of everybody promoting positive mental health and taking the right steps to make sure that their needs are being met and that they are looking after themselves first. So just on that note, gents, by all means, get the stuff off your chest. I know it's going to be a frustration. Of those players out, which one do you think is the biggest shoes to fill for the upcoming season? And which one do you think, maybe potentially is going to be a bigger loss to the team than we perhaps realised looking at them in the list here? Lucas, I'll let you have the first crack at this one, mate. Where do you think the biggest challenge lies?
I think Dimi is a big loss, and I'll tell you why. I think when Carl came in, he didn't favour him because he didn't really fit into that new style. And you notice the games he took in charge after the resumption after COVID, I think Dimi might have started one or two, but he was on the bench for majority of them. So I think he just didn't really fit into that style of football. And yeah, because Dimi didn't really, he was an offensive player, didn't really like doing the defensive stuff. But in saying that, with him gone, and he was there for a few seasons, who have we got that's going to take that responsibility if that's something where we don't have, like a traditional 10 or an attacking player like that? Or Angus Thurgood, I thought maybe, because he's kind of got that kind of number 10 style, I guess, offensive style. So I think that could be a big loss. And also Dimi had set piece stuff, like he could put in corners and he took free kicks. Who's gonna do that now? That's my question.
Yeah, and I guess that's a challenge, right? Like, obviously, I think when when Petratos departed, Carl Robinson was actually still in charge of the club. So they were obviously working in a particular direction in the off-season, and I don't think his style actually complements a, proper number 10. I don't think he accommodates that luxury in his style and structure. But the challenge is Petratos, he very much needs to be the main man in his side because he's almost like a volume playmaker where he needs a lot of the ball and he needs it consistently every game. Otherwise, he's a little bit useless. Not useless. Like, he's a great player. I'm not taking away from that. But, like, if he's not getting on the ball and he's not getting comfortable in the rhythm of a game, he very rarely actually goes and does something interesting with it. And I think that was the challenge that we saw after even the grand final appearance. Is that following season when I've forgotten the guy's name, but the Argentine playmaker that you guys had that got injured, and with Riley McGree departing, he kind of got moved into a wider role. Yeah, Ronnie Vargas, thank you. That's the guy.
Yeah, he was Venezuelan, I think.
Venezuelan, yeah, he was something like that. I nearly said Roddy Vargas, but that's the old Melbourne Victory defender from back in the day, and I knew it wasn't correct.
We did have Pato Rodriguez for half of the 17-18. He was Argentine.
Yeah.
Funny you say that with Dimi. So that I went to a Sydney FC Jets friendly in Dubbo before the 18-19 season, so the season after the grand final, and I spoke to Dimi, and this goes back to what you said about Ernie. He said to me, the teams have figured out how we play and how we break them down, like on the counter attack, and it's not working, and we need to find something else. And this was preseason, and I was like, has Ernie figured this out? There's got to be a plan B, and he said no. So, and like you said, Dimmy, like I said, one-way player. Ball's got to be his feet. He's an offensive player. That's it. So.
Yeah, and I guess the additional challenge, and to give him credit, like I don't want to go out there and say that he's a volume player and then like have people savage me in the comments. They can, that's fine. But also, like he lost a lot of the other key pieces. So if you know that going forward the ball's going to have to run through Petratos and there's no longer Riley McGree there to make secondary runs, there's no longer Naboo that you've got to track and worry about. I think to an extent O'Donovan was on the outs with that long-term suspension that he had, it does become very one-dimensional, and the pressure heaps on him to say he's not playing well because he's the one getting the ball, but the reality is there's no support around him to actually do that. Apologies for making you wait, Austin. I kind of went off on a tangent there. I can't help myself sometimes, mate. But what are your thoughts on the players out? Who do you think are the biggest shoes to fill, and who might be the most challenging to replace in the remainder of the window?
I think Dimi Petratos as well would be the biggest loss, but I do think Rami Nazarene could fill his spot really well. He's been playing really well in pre-season, playing in that number 10 role. So I see him playing there in the season.
Yeah, and we've spoken about for a long time in the A-League trying to get, young players and promising players regular football and regular minutes. And I think the loan signing is an interesting one. I would have thought... I think his contract's actually up at the end of the loan as well. So if he does really well, City will probably throw a contract his way in January. But if he doesn't, or if he does okay, there is that scope there for the Jets to try and bring him in on a free at the end of that contract deal. So I think it works out for everybody really, really well and really effectively. We do want to see like an expansion on that. And can we get transfers within the league? Can we get more permanent loan signings? All that sort of stuff as well. But I think he's an excellent shout. I'll give a shout out to Abdiel Arroyo as well. I thought he was decent up front. He had all the physical traits to be excellent in this league, and it is a physically demanding league. He just never quite had the confidence level, I think. If he had got 2 or 3 goals in preseason and, was a little bit underdone when he arrived, I think he could have been something fantastic, and it would have been interesting to see him get another crack at it this season. Obviously, you guys have O'Donovan, so, there's that there.
He was bloody quick too. He was so quick.
Yeah, like he was an interesting one. He's kind of almost a missed opportunity player where I think if he had more time in the league, maybe he would have been that cult figure, that cult hero. And then Glenn Moss as well. Like, it's always really difficult. I think the biggest credit I'll give Glenn Moss is that he was more than willing to be a number one, and he was more than willing to be a backup and an understudy for someone like Luis Italiano to try and carry them through. And losing that bigger player, even the Petratos thing, that's a big player in your dressing room because he's one of the most experienced A-League players and he's a creative hub and he's very well rated around the league. Glenn Moss the same way. Like, that's a locker room leader that I don't think has been replaced adequately, but we'll talk about that further with the transfers in, which we'll get to in a moment. Before we do that though, gents, we're going to go into the big question. Basically, each week and each of these different season previews, I ask the fans for their perspective on a big question, and sometimes they're a little bit, difficult, a little bit tricky to kind of get into. Obviously, this year, the ownership is a big factor. There was previously a consortium that was interested in purchasing the club that unfortunately failed the fit and proper persons test, or I think the other issue as well was that the Ledman Group was unable to actually provide 2 years of financial history, which meant they pulled away from the deal, which is smart. That's the right thing to do. If you can't find out the financial history in the true scenario that you're walking into, that's what you have to do, unfortunately. It is looking increasingly likely that the FFA is going to take back full control of the Jets for the upcoming season, which I think will help quite a bit and get that foreign ownership, or not foreign ownership entirely because there are good foreign owner groups, but get that Ledman Group out of the league and out of the A-League rights picture. What do you guys think from a coaching capacity? Obviously, no full-time manager announced at time of recording. Craig Deans has done, I think, a hell of a job to get them through pre-season up until this point. What do you think is the first step in returning the Jets to former glory? And what do you think needs to happen this season for you guys to feel like you are heading in the right direction again and that you are taking positive steps back towards maybe not necessarily even finals football or challenging for a title immediately, but at least heading back towards a brighter future? Austin, I'll let you have the first crack at this one, mate. It's a complex question. Take as much time as you need, and I've rambled for about 10 minutes, but what do you think are the first steps returning the Jets to their glory days?
Obviously, getting a new owner would be nice, and appointing a permanent coach for the season. I think Craig Deans will go through with the whole season, but we need someone there to take them in the A-League,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what it is about Newcastle. Con Constantine, I don't know if you remember him, Austin. He was a bit of a character back in the day, even in the early days of the A-League itself. Nathan Tinkler, obviously, had all the cash in the world, but not the most common sense when it came to football, which is a recurring theme for Gold Coast United and a few other sides as well. And then, recently, I think everybody was really excited about the Ledman Group, and then for whatever reason, the LED light market globally just tanked and everyone stopped buying them for whatever reason. And that company hasn't done well, and by way of that, it's impacted the Jets at the same time. Do you think you guys will know the Newcastle football community better than I do? If the FFA takes control of it, are there many people within that Newcastle football community that you think would step up and want to try and get exposure at A-League level? We always hear about Edgeworth Eagles pushing to be in a second division. We've heard about, I can't remember, is it Magpies, Canterbury Magpies? Pushing.
Maitland Magpies.
Maitland Magpies, thank you. That are pushing to get into a national second tier as well. I think they're on the working group for the championship group of second division clubs. So there is definitely an interest in global exposure, but it's not always necessarily attracted towards the Jets themselves. Austin, the question I'll come back with you is, if not the Ledman Group, who do you think is best positioned to be operating a club out of the Newcastle area?
Look, just someone that puts money into the club where it's needed, I think more money should go into the youth academy. I think that's somewhere where we can thrive to bring up players for our A-League team, because we don't usually have the money to buy players that are that good. So bringing them up would be a good thing to start off with.
Yeah, and I guess that's a challenge. I think what we've spoken about with Laurie McKenna, who I think does a great job trying to patchwork quilt together the best he can each season, and Joel Griffith's got a tough gig as well. But, if they can get more investment from that same Newcastle community that we've heard about, that we've spoken about, that unites behind the team when they're winning, that would really help a great deal to help shape and, continue to build that Newcastle culture rather than that ownership culture, whether it's a mining magnate or a Chinese business or whatever else. Same question as well for yourself, Lucas. What do you think the first steps are in returning the Jets to their former glory?
I thought this is probably the question I thought about the most. I just wrote down, I coach, and I use words proactive and reactive, and that could be as a coach, in the style of football you want to play, or in anything really. But I just want the new owner to be proactive and long term. So long term, proactive owner. Engage the community. Think outside the box, because inside the box hasn't worked. Proactive long-term owner, proactive long-term coach, and this is like a wish list. And long-term stability. So those three things, I think. So long-term owner, long-term coach, and long-term stability, but proactively, I think that's what we need to do. Because stability is a weird word in the A-League, because we're not the only club that has these problems. But yeah, if we just had some stability, I think that could bring some success, because you look at the clubs that do have that, and they are usually the ones that do well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've exercised tremendous restraint to just have that simple list. If it was me putting together a wish list, it'd be like build 10 new stadiums and signs like and whatever else. So, yeah, I think you've done quite well. But I think the interesting point, and Austin, you touched on it as well, was that it's okay now, I think, for the maturity of the league and where we're at, to understand that certain clubs are looking towards more internal development and building their own players. We've seen Western Sydney most recently have launched their full academy. Central Coast down the road have, launched an academy that's been working for a few seasons with not that much success, but that's fine. That's their thing to work through. Even to an extent like Melbourne City, Sydney FC, Melbourne Victory building big training ground facilities for their first teams, and then building academy structures within and underneath that. Adelaide United this season, I think, is following a similar tact, where they are very much developing young South Australian talent. It's not the worst thing, and you can do it successfully while still remaining competitive in the league, trying to develop that local talent. Are there any players, as far as you're aware, Lucas, that are in that kind of Newcastle team? I know Ryan Hoffman is one, Jason Hoffman's one, but that are, local Newcastle talent, or anyone that you see on the periphery in and around the Newcastle area that could potentially make the jump up to the A-League to be more local involved?
Well, I do know that when Kyle was just in charge, he had a look at a few players from the local NPL. I'm not sure of their names. It was in the Herald, the newspaper. So they definitely keep an eye on local talent. I know in the W League they look at it a lot more, and it's a bit different, but There definitely is. Like Newcastle and the Hunter Valley traditionally is a hot spot for football. Traditionally, you look at Craig Johnson. There's footballers there. Talented footballers, young footballers. I think they're just, and this goes with Austin as well. More money in the youth academy to find these players and build relationships with the clubs, so that if a coach sees a player and says, "Hey, this kid could be a emerging Jet," get in touch with them and then go that way. I think, definitely, there definitely would be. They just need to look in the right places.
Yeah, and there's a couple of players in other A-League squads that were juniors from around the Newcastle area. I think Connor Metcalf at City is one. He's from in and around that same area. I think one of the two youngsters from Sydney FC, either Ryan Teague or Cameron Pupion, were originally playing some of their football in and around the Newcastle area as a junior before making their way through those academy structures. So clearly, the talent's there. It's just a question of, because let's be honest, the issues that Newcastle's currently facing, they weren't necessarily there 3 or 4 years ago, where some of those players would have been coming through. So either they need to kind of double down and start saying, we're going to be the club that develops all the Hunter talent, and if there's talent in the Hunter region, they're coming to Newcastle. They're not going interstate. They're not going to other academy projects. And I know that can be challenging, but at the same time, you really want to always make sure that you've got the first claim to talent coming through in your own region. You need to stake your own claim in your area first before you worry about everything else. And that's something that Melbourne City's been accused of not doing well enough. Western United now, MacArthur's got that challenge this season. So there's a whole bunch of clubs that haven't done it well, but Newcastle being a one club town and being a one region specific club, they really should have a better catchment and a better pool of young players coming through each and every season. There are, shining lights. I think Angus Thurgood, we've already touched upon. I think he's got great talent. Ben Kantarowski, go back in the day, he was 16 when he first started playing, and he's been a stalwart of the club all the way through. So there are stories of great Newcastle talent coming through that academy, but you'd want to hope that there's 1 or 2 a year that are promising youngsters that may not make the grade, that may move on once they hit that 23 and the registration requirements for the league itself. But you do want to kind of see more of it, and maybe this is the season. Maybe there are names and scholarship players that are on the list as far as the squad is concerned that we don't know anything about now, but when we come back at the end of the year and we do our season review, they've blown us away because the talent pool's there. They just need the opportunity to thrive and to show it. And as you already mentioned, Austin, maybe one of those players is someone like Rami Nazarene or something like that. Maybe we see more loan market stuff there and Newcastle starts to leverage the loans across the division a little bit more. Thank you both for going through that. I know it's a difficult question and it's a big, broad question, and they're always the toughest ones to kind of run through, but it is always great to get fan perspectives on what's going on in the region. We are going to jump back in. We're going to head through the contracted players currently at the club. So this is players who've had their contracts either extended or were contracted into this season from last year. So basically this is the building block of which you guys are going to try and carry through this season. You obviously can't sign 20 new players every off-season. No club does, but these guys are the stability that are going to carry you through to the next phase. So Luis Italiano as a goalkeeper, a defensive group made up of John Katrumbus, Nikolai Topper-Stanley, Connor O'Toole, Lachlan Jackson, and recently re-signing Nigel Bugard. I'll throw Jason Hoffman in that list. I think I've got him here as like a midfielder attacker. He will probably play at right back most times this year. Midfielders including Stephen Igorkovic, Angus Thurgood, Ben Kantarowski, who we've already mentioned, and attackers Roy O'Donovan and Costa Petrados, in addition to quite a few youth and scholarship players. Of that list, the main A-League squad, is there anyone that jumps out at you guys as being a key and critical player for this season that you guys are either hoping to build around or will be a big leader for the club? Austin, I'll let you have the first crack at this, mate. Of the contractor players, who do you see as being the most important for the upcoming season?
Angus Thurgood and Roy O'Donovan can be very important. We need them. Like Angus Thurgood is just a great player. Can thread a through ball, lob ball over the top, play up front if he wanted to. With Roy O'Donovan, he can play anywhere. So those two could be very important for this season.
Yeah, I think Thurgood did play up front for the Ollie Roos in those couple of friendlies that they had as well, and he looked tidy, and I think there was also a decent shout. I didn't watch all the Newcastle games after lockdown, full disclosure, but there was a lot of people that said Angus Thurgood was one of the better players in that Newcastle side once the season resumed, and perhaps one of the players that got the most out of Carl Robinson's system. So if he can continue with his platform this year and continue at that rate of development, he's going to turn into an absolute cracking player. Same question for yourself though, Lucas. Of that main group, we've mentioned Thurgood, we've mentioned O'Donovan. Who jumps out at you as being key and critical for the season coming up?
Stevie Igorkovic. I know that there's 1 year left on his deal, and he may still leave, but he is by far probably our best player in that midfield, and so important because yeah, he's just awesome, and I don't want to lose him. And I know, you can talk about it, with the whole Carl thing, and he wanted to leave, but he did it the right way. And if he's going to stick it out for the year, he's the guy that's going to keep us glued together in that middle of the park, I think.
Don't bite my head off here, but Steven Igorkovic is always the player that comes up where everyone says, oh, he's the most underrated player in the league. But I hear that sentence so often that I think he actually is rated really high in the league, if that makes sense. Like, the secret's out. Yeah. Steven Igorkovic is a great player and he's very, very good. Look, I'd agree. I think he's probably the strongest player in the squad. And there are some good players in there. Like, I rate Nikolai Topor-Stanley very highly. I think Bugard's great as well, but they're not getting any younger. Roy O'Donovan, I think, is 33 this season, turning 34 later in the year. There are some promising youngsters that we've already mentioned in that group as well, the likes of Johnny Katrumbis, Connor O'Toole, Angus Thurgood, Costa Petrados. Will be interesting to see. He's the main man, Petrados, this year for the first time probably since he was about 12 years old, so maybe he will get the chance to kind of step into his brother's shoes a little bit. But yeah, I would agree. Steven Igorkovic is one of the few players in this squad that would sit within that proper like elite tier. He's a very, very talented player. Jumping forward now to transfers in. Now, you haven't done the fewest in the league. Sydney FC still hasn't signed anybody, but there aren't that many to speak of, unfortunately. Mickey Neal has joined from Rockdale City Suns. There are a few additional trialists from an NPL level currently playing in friendly games. It'll be interesting to see if any of those sign in the next couple of weeks. Rami Nazarene, we've already mentioned, joins on a season-long loan from Melbourne City. And then Valentino Yule, joining from Western United, where he played last year. He was a free transfer, has joined after a long trial period with the Jets themselves. What are you guys making of those three signings? Mickey Neal making the step up from NPL, always fantastic to see. Rami Nazarene, promising youngster we've already mentioned. And Valentino Yule, desperate, I think, looking for an A-League opportunity, getting into kind of his prime, as I think he's 26, 27 at time of recording. So he's really desperate, I think, to get that A-League opportunity and get games starting. Austin, who jumps out at you from that group? And what are your thoughts on the transfers in so far?
Valentino Yule, I think, is a great player. In pre-season he's such an electric player. He gets around players, puts the ball into the box, so dangerous in the box. He's just a great player. And I think who was our other signing?
Mickey Neal, who I think is a left-sided defender, and Rami Nazarene, who can play anywhere across like the attacking midfield.
Is another great signing. I don't think Mickey Neal is at the club anymore. I think he might have left. I think he only signed the last season and then he's off. But yeah, I don't know.
This would not be the first time, Austin, that the A-League website has let me down in one way or another when I've gone and looked at transfers in, so that would not shock me if Mickey Neal has moved on elsewhere. But I think, like Valentino Yule, as you've kind of mentioned, he's like a proper live wire. There aren't that many out there in the league or that aren't already signed for other clubs. As someone who's not blessed with natural electric pace, watching someone fly around the pitch like that is a sight to behold. So good to see that he's getting involved and hopefully getting an opportunity this year. Same question for yourself, Lucas. Thoughts on the three signings in so far, and how do you think they'll do this season?
The fellow we got from Canberra, but that's towards the last season, the left back, Lucas, I can't pronounce his last name. He's kind of, Morogas, yeah. He had a pretty good end of the season, and I think he did well in the trial game against MacArthur. So he might have a big year. But Yule, I didn't go to the MacArthur. I haven't seen him play in real life pre-season. He would be a big signing because you think of like Naboot. Yes, he was good at Victory. Then he went over to Thailand and stuff. When he came to us, he just exploded. This could be the same thing with this fella. Like all he needs is the opportunity and the platform and the games, and he'll do well. I think he's very quick, and a front third player. I think he'll have a big. Even with Remy, with the youth Australia games with the Angus Thurgood, I thought Remy did pretty well too in those games. I know he scored a goal in one of them. I watched them, but yeah, I think the new signings, Remy and Yule, I think they'll do really well.
And I guess the credit you give him is that Mickey Neal was early in the window. Rami Nazarene was very early in the window as well. Yule has obviously been trialling for a while, playing in those preseason games. There hopefully isn't going to be that grading in period. There's a lot of clubs that are making signings like in the last week or so. And that's for international players that have got to go to quarantine or have just come out of quarantine. So there's quite a few players around the league that are underdone. If Newcastle is going to benefit from anything, it'll be the fact that they've had like a solid preseason core all the way through. even though not with the manager. I know Arthur Papas is apparently waiting in the wings to be announced. It remains to be seen if that was something that was part of the previous ownership group inquiry, or if the FFA steps in and takes control of the club, if they will honour that contract or they will continue to sign him and appoint him. It would be very harsh on Craig Deans, to be honest, but that's an outsider perspective looking in. So that does kind of segue a little bit into one of our future topics. I'll bring it forward. The current manager and assistant. What do you guys want to see? We're within a week of the season being announced. Even just seeing something like Craig Deans being announced as the interim manager until a permanent appointment is made, I think would help quite a bit. Austin, what are some of your thoughts? What do you think you guys need in a manager, and what would you like to see happen before the season kicks off?
I'd like them to announce Craig Deans as the permanent manager for this season, and maybe even Daniel McBreen as the assistant. That would be a good start off with for the season. Now, I want to see the Jets play very passionately, so those two, from being at the club for so long, really help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a couple of other ex-players that are in coaching positions around the league and around the division that, you kind of want to see Newcastle. Well, this is a whole other tangent. I could probably kill 45 minutes of this podcast just going through it. This year, I think we've got 9 different coaches in the league, not including Newcastle in that conversation, that have played in the division itself. And it makes me feel ancient remembering back to the early start of the league, watching these players play, and now they're in their managerial careers. There's a lot of those that are first-year managers. There's a lot that have gone through long journeys at their club specifically. Selfishly, I'll use City as an example. Paddy Kisnorbo was a youth team coach, was a youth team manager, won the youth league, won the W League, was a first-team coach, assistant manager, now moving into a manager role. We saw a similar pathway for Steve Corica. Ufuk Talay had to get his opportunity at Wellington, but did a long internship or apprenticeship or whatever you want to call it. Warren Moon at Brisbane, Richie Garcia at Perth, Carl Vard at Adelaide. It would be good to see Newcastle really try and take that same step and say, okay, we've got a group of players that are coming into retirement. And I'm going to earmark here, and hopefully they don't absolutely kill me and think that they're going to play till 40. But players like Nikolai Topor-Stanley, Nigel Bugard, as they're winding down in their careers, it would be great to see them start launching their coaching journey with Newcastle so that you've got that consistent base of coaches either at a youth league structure or going into the first team as assistant managers to try and understand what it is so you can get that consistency and get that long-term nature with it. It's one of the things that I think is changing in the A-League for quite a few of the different clubs. But same question as well for yourself, Lucas. What would you like to see from an appointment? Would you like to see Papas come in and what he might bring to the team, some fresh eyes, or would you prefer to have Craig Deans joining for permanently in the role?
Well, I think Craig should take over this season. I think it's too late to come in and embed something. It would take 2 or 3 months to see what that looks like. Arthur, I would like. He's a proactive coach. I'm pretty sure. Was he a Bentley Greens coach from Melbourne? Was he Bentley Greens?
Yeah, so he was. He was also at Oakley Cannons for a little while as well. I think he had an international job with Malaysia or something like that. He was an Ange Postecoglou assistant back in the day. He's had a variety of roles, and he's still relatively young. I think he's in his mid-30s, but has had a long coaching career for quite a few seasons.
Yeah, he would be. I would like him to come in. Maybe if they bring him in towards the end of the season, not to coach, but just evaluate the squad, and then he takes over. But Craig and Macca and that they love the Jets. The Jets people. Even though Denny's a Mariners legend, there's not really many Mariners legends. But I think that's the right thing to do. At least say put it out to the public. That's who's taking it on for the season. That way we know. And just get the state of the players, Ruffy or whatever, play for the shirt, show us you want to be here, and then we can go from there, I think.
And, links to everybody's Twitters in the description below for any Mariners fans that want to go after Lucas for saying that they don't have any club legends, but that's fine. Is Danny McBreen retired? Is he still going for Edgeworth at 45 years of age, or however old he must be at this point?
No, he's retired. I remember taking 2 non-football people to the Edgeworth Jets FFA Cup game last season. Like, that goal, even these 2 non-football people were like, what the hell was that? Like I think I got 2 people to start following the Jets or going to Edgeworth games because of that goal. So I always say thank you for that. But,
yeah, nothing worse than bringing friends along to a match and they start supporting the other side because of this display that they've seen. But
right.
like it happens to me all the time. The people that I've dragged to derby matches that didn't come back to any City games after that or Heart games is crazy. We are now going to jump in, and I asked both of you to put your money where your mouth is a little bit, and we'll go through expected lineups. Now, Football Manager is my jam. I love putting together different structures and different lineups ahead of a season, so I love this sort of stuff. It'd be interesting to see what you guys have thought and how your different lineups counteract with each other. But we're first going to jump in here with Lucas's dream team. So, Lucas, you've gone with a 3-4-1-2 or a 5-3-2, however you want to word it, depending on where you position the fullbacks. I'll run through the lineup here, and then what I'll do is I'll hand it over to you to talk us through it. You've gone with Italiano in goal, Katrumbis, Topor Stanley, and Lachlan Jackson as the 3 central defenders. Ryan Hoffman at right wing back, Connor O'Toole at left wing back, Kantarovski and Igorkovic as the defensive midfield pairing, Thurgate playing as the number 10, that attacking midfielder, and Valentino Ewell and Roy O'Donovan up top. Looking at this lineup, talk us through the structure that you've gone with. It's always tough during pre-season to figure out what the A-League managers are doing in terms of the lineups that they're putting out each and every week. Where do you think the strengths lie? Where do you think potential weaknesses are? What do you want to see from this team this season?
I found it kind of hard because I wanted to put Bogart in there, in that back 3. But if you look at that back 3, you think maybe because I hate, and this might be a coach thing, I hate putting left footers on the right side. I'm a left footer, so it's so uncomfortable. You always have to turn inside, unless they've got both feet. But you could maybe take Katrumbis out, but Bogart's not really quick, so you're going to get burnt for pace. I just think that shape isn't too different to what Carl had, and I think that Deansy and Macca have kind of just settled with that for now until the new coach comes in and they can do what they want. But I think that formation will get the best out of Thurgate, O'Donovan and Ewell, and with Hoffman's definitely got the engine, even in his early 30s, to get up and down. And O'Toole has looked good, especially in the post-COVID games. So I think that kind of fits, like I said, the players we have.
Yeah, I mean, I think what kills Ryan Hoffman is he's turned into a silver fox at 31 years of age. He's not quite as old as he looks, but he's still definitely got the engine. Here's what I'll counteract with this, right? If they're playing this sort of shape and structure, how are all their preseason friendly games like 3-3 draws and 4-3 wins or something like that? They've got to have bodies getting into the box, or they're going to be an absolute nightmare for you guys this season because you're going to see 7 goals every single game. I'm an ex-Heart fan. I know what that's like. I understand the pain. But yeah, I think it's an interesting one. But there's a little bit of everything in this one. I think that defensive midfield pairing is very, very strong. Obviously very experienced in the league as well. A couple other players you could potentially drop into that position as well. I think Thurgate's a fascinating one. I do think they're going to play him quite a bit. He started most of the friendlies based on the Twitter lineups we've seen. But it will be very interesting to see what his role actually ends up being, where he sits in that team. I think there was a couple of games where he played in the middle alongside Igorkovic, almost a little bit deeper. And there were 2 wingers on either side. So, yeah, it could be very interesting. But what I want to hear from Austin. Austin, pick this apart, mate. Where are the issues with this one? Why haven't you gone with this lineup as well? Where do you think it's weakest? Where do you think it needs a little bit of a tweak or a change?
I was going to do 5 at the back for my formation, but I just chose 4 at the back. But I do think they will play 5 at the back for the first game. I think Rami Najjarine will start at Cam this season. I do think that midfield is strong, even if they do play that. Yeah,
and I mean, look, it's still a pretty strong spine. Even though he's older, I rate Nicola Topor Stanley. Lachlan Jackson, it still feels like a promising youngster, even though I think he's like 25, 26 now. He's been around longer than I think everyone thinks. Katrumbis, obviously fantastic to see him playing again. I'm not 100% sure where his best position actually is. He's one of those players that he could be a defensive midfielder, he could be a fullback, he could be a central defender. I think he's still trying to figure out where he fits in that lineup. But yeah, there are some strengths there. Connor O'Toole, Hoffman, I think it gets the best out of them, allows them to get forward into games. I think the one that we haven't quite mentioned yet, Matt Miller, when he comes back in January, we know that he's got the capacity to fly up and down that line all afternoon. So if it gets the most out of him, if it gets the most out of Valentino Ewell, getting him alongside O'Donovan, who we know is tidy with the ball and a good finisher, and if it helps O'Donovan having a speedier, more mobile player alongside him to do that doggy work and drag defenders, that will help it quite a bit. Lucas, don't panic. I'm going to give you the chance as well to tear Austin's team apart, which we're going to jump into now. So having a look at Austin, you've gone with a more classic 4-3-3, two midfielders at the base, an attacking midfielder, a centre attacking midfielder, as you mentioned, and two players out wide, which is always good to see. The thing that you want is to have two fans that have differing opinions on how a team's going to play. It means that you've got good depth. It means there's multiple players looking to push into a starting lineup. Excuse me. You've gone with Jack Duncan in goal, returning to the club after a brief spell over in Denmark. Ryan Hoffman and Connor O'Toole as the fullbacks again. Topor Stanley and captain Nigel Bugard as the defensive partnership, as they were last season. Thurgood and Igorkovic as the defensive midfield pairing, which we have seen a little bit in pre-season. Nazarene, as you mentioned, at the number 10. Yule playing on the right. Costa Petrados coming in and playing on the left-hand side. And O'Donovan leading the line up top. Talk us through this one, mate. I'm curious. What is the first name that you put on this team sheet, and where do you think the strength lies in this structure?
I think Costa Petrados, he hasn't been playing that much in pre-season, but I do think he could get a lot of game time this season, and I think he's a great player. I don't know if he's a left winger, but wherever he plays really well. I think Jack Duncan will get a start. He isn't even signed yet, but I do think he will start in the F3 Derby in the first round of the season. But yeah.
Oh, great point. I didn't even think of that. He wasn't in the transfers in that are currently listed on the website. It wouldn't shock me if the A-League website just hadn't written one down. But yeah, I didn't even realise that because he's been, I think, starting most of the pre-season friendlies, but doesn't at the moment have a contract. That's fascinating. I didn't even realise that portion.
Yeah, they're waiting for the new owner to come in so we can afford his wages, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. But, well, I guess he's unemployed at the moment, isn't he? So, like, I don't know, is he going to get back pay for any of this stuff? Has he got a part-time job at Coles or something in the Hunter Valley that he's working on the side? All right, Lucas, I'm going to give you a chance here. Pull this one apart a little bit. Where do you think the issues are? Why have you gone with a bit more defensive structure? And where do you think this area could potentially be improved, or where maybe there are some holes that need to be plugged to make this system work?
This one looks like an Ernie, more attacking, counter-attacking team, like an Ernie shape, because he played 4-2-3-1. I hate playing three at the back personally, but I just think that's what our best shape is at the moment. Looks good. I know Costa, if you give him the right game time, he could do well. Remy, of course, and Yule. So the attacking, I think this shape, so they might bounce between the two, right? So if we're coming up against someone, higher in the table, maybe we come against with 3 or 5 at the back. If we come against the Mariners, we want to attack them. I think there might be something like this that we would do.
Oh, look, 100%. I mean, we just do this because I like the exercise. I think it's fun. But the reality is they'll probably play 10 different shapes and formations throughout the course of the season. They'll probably play 3 or 4 throughout the course of a game, depending on form, fitness, all that sort of stuff. I think what's good, or the challenge that Newcastle have, is there are certain positions on this sheet where they aren't as deep. I think it's interesting, Lucas, that you had 2 entirely different centre-backs. So you've got good central defensive depth with Topor Stanley, Bugard, Katrumbus and Jackson. I think the fullback areas need a little bit more depth. Right fullback will be sorted once Matt Miller arrives. You guys have already mentioned, I've completely forgotten his name, the Canberra youngster that'll be pushing Connor O'Toole for a start at left back. Yeah. That's good. It's really the front third, I think, where the depth actually starts to become a bit of an issue. Like Costa Petrados, unknown quantity. Valentino Yule, unknown quality in that wide area. Rami Nazarene, this will be really the first time an opportunity that he gets to pull the strings for a side, whether that's in a wide position or playing at the 10 centrally. I think that's the area that stands out at me as being a challenge. And if Roy O'Donovan does something stupid and has a 10-game suspension to deal with by a headbutt or fly kick or whatever else, there's also a challenge that maybe there isn't that necessarily striker there, but Yule could do it, Thurgood could do it, whoever else could do it. Lucas, just back to your team, who was the first name that you put on the team sheet? Like, who was the person that you wrote down?
I always build from the back first. I did have I had Italiano/Duncan because I didn't know if we'd sign him or not, depending on. So I always go with the goalkeeper, and then I knew I had the shape picked out. I was just, who's 3? Does Bogart go in or does he start on the bench, kind of thing. So yeah, I start from the back and work my way through it, kind of thing.
Yeah, cool. I mean, look, the benefit is that even with all the struggles the team's having, neither of these are bad 11s. Neither of these are 11s that are not exposed to the A-League itself. I think the challenge that you guys have kind of mentioned is going to be scoring goals, but so far from pre-season results, they've scored quite frequently. From the penalty spot, from set pieces against Melbourne City. In particular, I think they scored 2 from corners, which is going to be a key route for them and a key avenue. So it wouldn't shock me if, Lucas, your structure is closer to what they play, but then they're looking to really capitalise on those areas that they see as being key attacking chances. And I think, Austin, what's great about yours is that in scenarios where they need to chase a goal, where they need to go after it, where they expect to dominate, hopefully at McDonald Jones Stadium, they've got the ability to bring those players on. There's good flexibility in the squad. There's good stuff there. Obviously, the challenge is going to be getting some of these players to actually have very good seasons. You're kind of asking this defensive lineup, this central defensive partnership, turn back the clock a little bit. I think they're 34 and 35 going into the start of the season. It's crazy to think Bugard, I think, is the one. No, Alex Wilkinson is the other. There's like 2 players remaining from the original starting season of the A-League, which is absolutely crazy. But yeah, like it's good to see. And I think Jack Duncan's a quality goalkeeper. We know there is still quality in this side all the way down the spine. It'll just be how those additional players complement them. But fantastic job for you both. Thank you for putting them together. I always love to see different people's thoughts and opinions on the league itself. And as we jump back in, we're in the home stretch now, gentlemen. We've already spoken about the current manager and assistant and what we expect with that. Hopefully for the Jets fans, for the players, for whatever else, there is some consistency announced in the next few weeks. The active support, you've mentioned the squadron previously, the Novocastrian Terrace or whatever it's called now. If you guys were going to try and market to someone who maybe has never been to an A-League game before, who might be new to the Newcastle region, who's either relocated there or just has never been to a game before, they might be a Knights fan that's never been to watch the Jets play at the same ground, how would you pitch that to them? How would you try and get someone through the gate, and what parts do you think they might enjoy the most about the Newcastle Jets fan base and the matchday experience that they could take and then hopefully become a Jets fan in the future? Lucas, I'll let you have first crack at this one, mate. What would your membership pitch or slogan be to someone who's never been to a game, or is perhaps even a fan that's umming and ahhing about getting a membership for the season ahead?
On Twitter or wherever, I always use the Never Tear Us Apart. If I'm sharing to be a member, round 1 away to Gosford, if you took them on that trip, I think that would really sell it to them, because that's back in the day, even now, it's a genuine experience. It feels like you're part of something, and when you walk down the main road of Gosford and you see like the 8-2 signs and stuff. It's that's what I do. You could sell, if someone's a Knights fan or something, you couldn't really sell. You could visit the beach, check out the city, and then you go watch the game. If they're already in Novocastrian, it's hard. But yeah, the away day, which is just 45 minutes an hour down the road, is really, really good. That's what I'd use as a selling point.
And usually the best marketing experience you can have is trying to get someone 3 points and a win and to celebrate. So at the moment, with the way things are going for the Mariners, you're almost guaranteed. It's very easy to bring up those 8-2 signs when you're on the right side of that result, but I'm sure people will be grinding their teeth, Mariners fans listening themselves. Same question as well for yourself, Austin. How would you try and sell the league? How would you try and get potential Newcastle fans to come and check out the matchday experience? Very similar to yourself, actually. You're going to a game, enjoying it, going back with your dad. What do you think is the best way to try and get new fans through the gate?
I think, like Lucas said, the Mariners F3 Derby, going to that, great experience. Get, whoever's going with you to the game to love it. Even the Western Sydney game that we have round 2, there's going to be a lot of booing in that one. That would be a very interesting one to go to, very entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be intimidating. Imagine never going to a football game and then you rock up and every player gets booed as they go through the Western Sydney lineup and coaching staff.
Bring your snake lollies, right? So you can throw them at the...
Yeah, exactly right. Flashbacks to Jan Jedovic when he played against Sydney FC the first time and then having to fish all those plastic snakes out of the goal. You do raise an interesting point, so we'll just double back on it. How do you guys feel about Carl Robinson? Do you kind of look at him and think that he ditched the club, or do you guys think that he tried to sort of find more stability in his environment? Lucas, I'll have you go first. What do you think about Carl Robinson's departure? Because we haven't really discussed it.
Being a Jets fan, I'm angry, right? But being a coach, I can understand why, because you don't know what they said. But obviously, with the situation at the club, and then another club from the same league comes along who may be in a brighter position, you can't blame him for wanting to do that. But it hurts because all the things he said previous about, rebuilding the club, long-term contract, good football, that all goes out the window now, and you kind of I'm more towards the side. I'd rather throw a snake at him than shake his hand. And I met him the first game he was in charge was Wanderers away, and I just felt like we were going to get something good out of this. And yeah, it's kind of all down the drain. But in saying that, I think the Wanderers are going to reap the rewards of it because he's a good coach, I think. So I don't like what he did, but I can understand why. So yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, it's a tough one. We kind of draw parallels between, like, I know and we spoke about football manager a little bit off screen earlier, but, we kind of expect players almost to be a bit robotic, and there is that human nature portion to it that we always don't necessarily take into account. Like, if he's in a scenario where Newcastle players, staff, fans are concerned about player payments with the current ownership model, and then a club comes in and he gets permission from the club to talk to them, you can kind of understand why you'd want to try and get that security. I draw a similar parallel between the raft of players that we've seen head over to the Indian Super League this year, where they're really just trying to gain financial security in their environment. But same question for yourself, Austin. How do you feel about Carl Robinson's departure? Are you going to be one of these people like Lucas throwing lolly snakes at him come round 2 or whenever it is?
I probably will be. I think he has ditched the club. I think he's seen Western Sydney as an opportunity to just get more money, better players there. Yeah, we did have our financial issues when he left, but we did have a few owners seeming like they were coming in, but as soon as he left, they all left. So I think he has ditched the club in the end.
Look, the best thing, like the best rivalries in sports are ones that are either cultivated by the fan groups and their matchday experiences and the histories. We don't need more marketing people telling us about derbies that we should or shouldn't care about. So it will be very interesting to see if this Newcastle-Western Sydney rivalry continues, not just through this season, but throughout future seasons as well. And of course, for you guys, hopefully you get a good result. Hopefully you finish above them this year and you can really rub it back in their faces come finals time. But that remains to be seen. We want everyone to be successful in the league, just not at the expense of our own sides. That's our right as fans and our use of the platform. First fixture, you guys have already mentioned it, F3 Derby away to Central Coast on the 31st of December as well. There's worse ways to spend your New Year's Eve, and you will see the fireworks, I think, at 9:30, unless they set them off too early like they did a couple of years ago against Perth. Season predictions and expectations for you guys. Obviously, we've spoken a little bit about the challenges facing the group. We know that the lineup itself isn't that horrific though. Where do you guys think is a decent pass mark for the season for Newcastle Jets, and where do you predict them to finish this year? I'll give you the first crack at this one, Austin. Where do you think the Jets will finish, and where would you say is a passing grade as far as a finish in the league season is concerned?
Look, they're not going to come last. I don't think they're going to come last. I think Mariners will come last again.
I agree with that one. Yeah.
I don't want to say this, but I think they're going to come 7th again. Like, they always seem like they come 7th. I would love to them to get into the finals, but it's just seeming like that now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge. There's a lot of... This is the weirdest part of the season because we're all super optimistic about our chances. Like, we're all really looking forward to seeing the ball be kicked, and then probably the worst thing is when you go out round 1 and lose a game, and then all that like hope is deflated. But if they get the right pieces playing at a good level, if Roy O'Donovan can score 10 goals this year, if Igorkovic can have a great season, even just to put himself in the shop window for his contract being up, if he can get another season out of the top or Stanley Bugard defensive partnership, there's a lot that could go right for Newcastle. It's not that many questions. Same questions are asked of a lot of different teams around the division, so it wouldn't be impossible for them to see them do that. You've gone with 7th. Lucas, same question to you. Season prediction for the year, where do you see as being an acceptable pass mark, or even potentially, as Austin has mentioned, a ceiling that they might hit?
I just think this season it's kind of tricky, like a season in limbo because of the ownership stuff. I said we'd finish 9th. I don't know who's going to finish behind us except the Mariners, but there's going to be a couple teams that are going to shoot themselves in the foot, because they got the coach wrong, or they got the players or the shape wrong or something. I think, like you said with Roy, if Roy can get into double digits, then we'll be close to the top 6. If we can get other players on the score sheet like Yule, Costa Petrados, we might make the top 6. You never know. It's one of those years, It's hard in like I said, being pre-season, you're so optimistic, but in 17-18 we were tipped not to finish in the top 6, and we finished 2nd. So it could be one of those years. It could be a 9th place finish, but either way, as long as we finish ahead of the Mariners, I'll be okay.
I mean, you guys went from 10th to 2nd, so surely 8th to 1st isn't that big of a challenge for them. Undefeated season, lads. Let's aim as far high as we humanly can. But unfortunately, and I'm sure we probably could have spoken for another hour and a half on all stuff Newcastle and all things Jets, that does bring us to the end of our season preview series. We will, of course, catch up throughout the year, and we will, of course, catch up at the end of the season and do like a season review to hopefully look back on the things that we've said and discussed here, and hopefully we've learnt some lessons. Hopefully there's been some promising youngsters burst through and Newcastle set up with a great squad heading into next next season as well. But thank you both, of course, for jumping on. I appreciate it a tremendous amount. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it as well. Austin, we'll go to you first. Obviously, A-League Insider. We've got the links in the description below, and the Twitter handle is there on the screen. If people want to check out more of your content, where is the best place to try and find more of you?
A-League Insider on Instagram and Twitter. Go and follow me there. Posting daily transfer rumours and news.
Yeah, perfect. And I keep throwing fuel on the fire of rumours. We say at the reserve team we only deal in fact, but I just can't help myself with some of these things, some of the things that we see linked to the different teams around the division, and you do fantastic work in that regard. Lucas, same question for yourself. Obviously, heading into the A-League season, it's definitely going to be Jet-centric, and it's definitely going to see that Never Tear Us Apart hashtag all throughout the course of the season. But if people want to check out more of your content, where's the best place to go?
L_E Twitter. I only use it for football pretty much. So if you ever want to have a chat, Jets, Liverpool, anything, never tear us apart. Lucas Kevin Eade, Facebook, Instagram. If you want to add me or follow me, it's usually football content. So yeah, they're the places you can find me.
If I make it up to Newcastle for an away day this year, everything permitting, I will definitely be hitting you both up to try and catch up before the game. Absolutely. But again, thank you. If you watching want to help support this channel a little bit further, you can drop a like on this video. It does get higher in YouTube search results when people look for Australian New Zealand football content. You can also subscribe to this channel. We're edging our way towards 100, hopefully by the time the A-League season kicks off. And of course, it'll keep you up to date on all our future videos and our content coming up throughout the A-League and W-League seasons. If you want to see all things Australian New Zealand football, head to thereserveteam.com.au. Links down in the description below, as well to all of our social media channels. But more than anything, we just appreciate you guys watching or listening along with us. From myself, from Lucas, from Austin, thank you so much for listening along. I've been Shaun, this has been the Reserve Team, and we'll see you all again next time.